Cedar Stevens here with Natural Magic Shop, and we're back for our second video with gardening in the time of coronavirus. I have, as you see, I've gotten a lot of progress done on this garden bed here. It was my intention to go all the way down the trail, but I broke a tool and I've also hurt my back now. I guess if you get to the point where you're breaking a tool, you're probably doing something to your body as well. So look how that breaking ground has fluffed up the dirt. So it's a good, 4 or 5 inches higher. So that means I've incorporated a lot of space in the soil to hold water and nutrients. So this is one of the reasons I like to do this rather than tilling. It preserves the soil structure better. So now I'm ready to shape the beds and put in maintenance trails. And I use an ordinary hard rake for this, and that will result in a trail that's just about the right breadth. I'm going to try to make the bed a little indented in the center and raised at the edges, and that will make the water, as it falls down from either watering it with a hose or rainwater, that water will tend to be caught in the center rather than rolling off and causing erosion. Uh-oh, look, I missed a Bermuda grass. The trail, the maintenance trail in here, needs to at least be wide enough for me to stand on it this way. That way I'll be able to squat down and weed or whatever I need to do to maintain in the garden bed. So I'm going to get this one garden bed going here, and then we'll plant some tomatoes. It's traditional to do a blessing on your garden before planting in it, and apple hard cider is usually what is called for. I didn't have any, but I think this Prosecco will do nicely, don't you? In the name of Persephone and Demeter, we call on the spirits of the land, awake, 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 and be blessed. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Have a swig. There you go.
Thank you.
When you go to plant your plants, you want to know what size it's going to be when it grows up. For example, these cute little dittany of Cretes, they get about 1.5 feet wide and maybe a mound of 1.5 feet high. So I'd want to plant them about 1.5 feet away from each other, so each of them has room to grow and be its full size without bumping up into the other plants. Most plants that you buy, like a 4-inch start or a 1-gallon start, you're going to want to dig a hole such that the plant is going to go in and end up the same depth as it was inside the pot. These little cuties, Dittany of Crete. It's an excellent ornamental oregano relative that has magical purposes. I like to plant them up front in the bed because as people drive by or walk by, they'll see the low growing things, and then I'm going to make it so that the tall growing things are towards the back. I am planting 3 of these because it's traditional to plant odd numbers of things. It just looks better. It's more harmonious. So you see these roots here? they're a little bit compacted at the bottom. That's called root circling. So if you see the roots have gone up to the edge of the pot, I often like to pick them loose. Even if it's damaging the roots a little bit, it'll mean that they don't encircle and kind of choke out the plant as it grows. Here is a Mexican oregano. It's going to be about 3 feet by 3 feet, maybe bigger, but it's not going to get there yet. So I'm just going to give it enough space so that it won't crowd out the Dittany of Crete. So you see I've got about 2 feet on this side and then another 2 feet. That'll be plenty. And it won't get too big this year that'll crowd out the basil over here. So they should play well together. All right, now we're going to put in some tomatoes. For tomatoes, I'm not going to follow that rule of planting it at the soil surface. For tomatoes, we're going to plant them very deep. So I'm going to use the sharpshooter. And notice how I'm standing only on my trails now. From here on out, I'm going to try, if at all possible, to never walk on the garden beds. That will keep the soil nice and loose. And the roots of the plants will be able to grow easily into it. I want to plant the tomatoes really deep here because tomatoes, unlike some other plants, they have the ability to make roots up and down their stems. If I plant the tomatoes at least a foot deep down, the soil down there is going to stay moister, and it's also going to be cooler when it gets really hot in the summer. If the bottom roots of the tomato are way down deep in the cool soil, that'll keep the whole plant cooler, and that means it will be able to produce for a longer time in the season. See, I'm going to make sure to save that name tag. Those roots are circling a little bit, so I'm going to gently pluck them away. This is causing a little bit of an injury to the tomato, but the injury will also stimulate growth. And these guys are pretty tough. So, pluck the bottom leaves off and plant that baby tomato real deep with the same soil that it's going to be living in. All right. And make sure the name tag stays associated with the plant. Okay, well, I am going to just keep planting in this way until I fill up my garden now. After we plant these little cuties, and these are prairie verbena or Dakota vervain. They love hot weather and dry soil, so that's why I'm putting them way down front here next to the concrete in the street. Plus, they're super cute. We want the pretty things up front. As soon as I get them planted in, I'm going to want to water those plants, and that will help minimize transplant shock. But before I water, I'm going to also want to put mulch on the babies. I'm using, in this case for mulch, I'm using coastal Bermuda hay. So that's the very same plant that we were digging up here. I've heard some people say that there's a danger of it coming up from seed, but that's never actually happened to me. I'm putting mulch down around the new plants because I'm going to want to water them really soon after planting them. That will help minimize the root transplant shock. But I don't want to water onto the soil directly, because when you do that, then mud splashes up onto the plants, and that is how soil-borne bacterial diseases that can harm your plant get passed around. So if I put mulch down first, then I can water as much as I want, and the mulch will prevent soil bacteria from getting splashed onto the plants. And of course it's going to make it so that the water is retained in the soil much better, because it'll shelter the soil and the plant from the sun and drying out. So it means you have to water less. It will mean that weeds that would crowd out your plants will get enough light to sprout, so that there will be less weeding. So it's all around pretty much a necessary thing to do after planting before you water. Don't these look so healthy? Wow! Hi, so we have planted some tomatoes, some marigolds, and some ornamentals, and some culinary herbs. And now I'm going to plant some seeds here. These are zinnia seeds that I saved from my old garden, so they don't look like they're coming out of a seed pack. I'm putting the Thumbelina zinnias. These are a miniature zinnia. I'm going to put those up here at front again, trying to put the short things in the front and the tall things in the back. I'm not going to be able to mulch over this because the seeds are going to need to be able to see the light in order to germinate well. And I've got another variety of zinnia. These were seeds I saved from my old garden as well, and these are called Cool Crayon Colors. So I'm putting them up here next to the edge of the garden, because that will be what my neighbors see, and I want something pretty for them to look at. Zinnias also, I'm starting to use them as defense against Bermuda grass, because they grow so thick and they can grow really tall really fast and shade out the Bermuda grass. So I've made whole beds where I didn't do a good job of eradicating Bermuda grass, and then just planted zinnias over it, and they grow all summer long. They're dazzlingly beautiful. They're shading out the Bermuda grass, so I call it annihilation by zinnias. So if I plant them here next to the Bermuda grass of the neighbor's lawn, I'm hoping that they'll grow big and prevent the Bermuda grass from going and grabbing the tomatoes. Buy one tomato plant, make 2 or 3. This Jim Dandy tomato, pretty orange salad-sized tomatoes, had 2 stems coming up, so I snipped one off and I'm putting it in a bottle of water, and it will root out. So now I'll have 2 Jim Dandy tomatoes.